welcome back to another episode of That's When I Knew the Podcast, where real people have real conversations about the journey towards building a meaningful career in the tech sales field. And today I have a great host. She is a host, but she's a guest on my podcast today. But she's also the host of a podcast that I love called What Is Your Legacy? And we're going to get into that. But before I introduce my guest and give her the red carpet to the show, a couple housekeeping items. Go ahead, subscribe to the show. If you're already a subscriber, leave a comment, leave a like, tell a friend about the show. It's much appreciated. So without further ado, I want to welcome my guest today. This person is actually a living legend in the tech sales field. She's plugged into a number of communities. She was the co-founder of Rev Genius, which is a community for all things sales and marketing. She's been at SDR, she's been in AE, she's led teams. She's, as I mentioned, currently the host of a great podcast called What Is Your Legacy, where she talks to different professionals about what their legacy is, both professional and personal. And she's currently working in sales enablement. And so we're going to pick her brain around that career. But without further ado, Galem Girmay, welcome to That's When I Knew the Podcast.
Thank you, Robert. I am so excited to have this chat with you. I did listen to a few episodes, and the most recent one I listened to was with our friend Larry Long Jr. You know, like, that's just where you got to start. Like, on any podcast, it's like, hey, did you have Larry on? Okay, cool. Let me start there.
Yeah, if you don't have Larry on your podcast, it's not quite a podcast yet.
No, it's not. Like, you're missing out on life. But that was just like a whole vibe. I loved the conversation, and it was just chill. So, yeah, thank you for having me here.
Yeah, we're going to have a good time, too. This is a podcast party. You know, you're actually the first podcaster or fellow podcaster I've had on the show, so it should be interesting.
Wow. Oh,
Yeah.
I feel honored. Thank you.
Yes, it's my pleasure. And all, you know, for the listeners, Galem is actually calling in from across the world. So you're in the UK, is that right?
Yep, in London, UK.
All right. What's the weather out there right now? You know, building our little rapport. You know, I feel like that's the typical rapport building question for yourselves. What's the weather like? You know. But what is the weather like in the UK right now? How are things?
Can I swear on this podcast, or should I keep it
You can
clean?
say whatever you want. You know, we are not on national television, so
I'll
YouTube.
just keep it at this. It's shit.
Oh, okay. It's raining shit.
Yeah, it's just like cold. I'm looking. So it is, I guess, 45 degrees, which is cold, rainy. I mean, it wasn't nice. This morning I went out for a run, and it was fucking freezing. I was like,
Wow.
I regret my life decisions at these moments in time where I'm like, what am I doing? Why am I out here at 7 in the morning for a run, and it's like 1 Celsius, which I don't even know what it's in Fahrenheit, but it's fucking cold.
Yeah, I can't relate. I'm sorry. I'm in California. Although it has been pretty chilly. It's been pretty chilly. But you know, in California, it rarely gets under 50 degrees, you know. Like, that's cold out here.
Yes.
That's good.
See, that's like where I'm supposed to be living. I just know that in my heart. I'm not supposed to be living in these places I've lived in. Like, you know, I was born and raised in Sweden. It is so cold
Okay.
there. I did not like that. Then I moved to the US. I live on the East Coast. Still cold on the East Coast, obviously. And then now I live in London. It's not as bad as Boston was, or being in Sweden was, but it's still not great.
Right. Well, I mean, that's a good segue into, just your upbringing. So let's talk about that. You know, a big part of my show is just like bridging the personal, the professional, getting to know the human behind the seller, right? And so I would love if you could just share a little bit about like your upbringing and, you know, kind of how your upbringing has shifted your lens in terms of building a career, if it's even had an impact on how you approach building a career today.
So as I mentioned, I was born and raised in Sweden. Lived there until I was 20, turning 21, and that's when I moved to the US to living outside of Boston. And I grew up in foster care from the time I was about 8 or 9 years old. I lived in one foster family, and then I moved to a second one when I was a bit older, like late teenager. And so, what I can remember, because I had to sit and think about this, like when were the moments in life that shifted certain parts? Like, obviously, moving from being my biological family to foster care and that transition and journey, but what are the other significant moments that made me like shift the way I think or shift the way I behave and think about life, and how that ties into like the different moments in life? Like, I like to believe that there are moments that we experience that at some point it will make sense and it will connect the little dots that you have created this experience throughout your life with. And for me, one of those that ties into sales was in the first foster family that I lived with. They were very strict about taking care of your room, cleaning every Friday, doing chores. And the only way for me to make money, to any like money in my pocket as like an 11-year-old, was to do extra chores around the house, cleaning cars, because they had like 3 cars. It was like a big house, which was again something I did not. I grew up poor in my biological family. We didn't have any money. I remember not being able to come back to school to talk to any of my friends about Christmas, because everyone would be like, "What did you get for Christmas?" And I was like, "Nothing." Like, we didn't, like, no, they couldn't. My parents couldn't afford anything for Christmas. Then I lived with this foster family, which was the complete opposite of what I grew up with. They had a big house, 3 cars, 2 dogs, bunch of kids living there, other foster kids, and it was just the complete opposite, day and night, from my experience growing up before that. But going back to like this way of learning how to make something for myself was, I was always the first person to sign up for every single thing that I can make money from. Like cleaning the cars, cleaning an extra room, or doing whatever. I was like, I'm going to do that because I had a goal. Like, I was going to buy my first phone because I was really into tech, like product
Can you
stuff.
believe that tech used
Funny
to, like
enough,
the cell phones, like they've come such a long way. That's pretty crazy. But sorry, I didn't mean to
right?
interrupt. But
No, it's such a long way. You're absolutely right. So that's what I was, saving towards and trying to get for myself. So I was always the first one to sign up for everything, like raising my hand, doing the things, saving up my money, and I learned so much from that. To like, now that I'm an adult, and now I started to. I've always worked, by the way. Like, it's always been my thing, because I didn't come from money. I didn't have anyone to back me up. I had zero network, nothing like to pull myself into professionally. Like, my parents never went to school, absolutely not to college. I was the first one in my family to go to college and graduate. So I didn't come from a traditional background, where I had any support or any guidance of what to do next. I just had to figure shit out on my own. And I was forced to do that at a very young age, from life perspective, and then going into like the professional aspects of learning how this world works, and developing from that. But those early memories and experiences of living with the foster family, having to sign up on a list of things to do in order for me to make a little bit of pocket money to save for something bigger, really taught me some valuable life lessons along, the next couple
no,
of years.
definitely, definitely. I mean, there's a couple things top of mind for me as you share your story. Number one, we actually come from similar backgrounds. I mean, I didn't grow up in foster care, but I would say I come from humble beginnings as well. And it makes me think, because, you are a living legend. Like, I see your work ethic today. Like, we were talking, for the podcasters out there, for people interested in podcasting, like there's prep that goes into these calls and stuff. So, and you and I were chatting. You edit your podcast, like you have a job. You're involved in these communities. You're a leader. Like, your work ethic is next level. Like, and so it makes sense, and it makes me think, like, because again, we both come from humble beginnings, and I think we're both exceptions to what happens from with people that come from our backgrounds, right? And it makes me think, like, on one spectrum, like, you are proof, and I would say I'm proof too. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So like the battles and the things and like all of the things that we go through coming up, it does ultimately make you stronger. And like, there's not many people that I would say have the amount of work ethic you have. And I would venture to say that, part of that work ethic has come from just, who you are and the things that you've had to endure growing up, in your upbringing.
Well, can I add
Go
something to
ahead.
this?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I've heard people say that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, and part of me agrees, and the other part of me like cringes when I hear
Yeah.
that, because what it means to me, it's not to say that that's not true or that you can't believe that, but what I think these moments, significant moments in life, and the challenges that we have to learn how to overcome, yes, it makes us stronger in some ways down the line. We don't see it in the moment. It's something that we reflect on afterwards. But what I think it really does that's helpful is that it builds like character. It helps us really like figure out what we are capable of in this life and what we can truly overcome. Because when I think about like what makes you stronger, I tend to think like what makes you physically stronger. But you know what? All these moments that we have to overcome, it makes us emotionally stronger. It makes us spiritually stronger if you believe and have faith. Um, but it builds character within us to overcome the next thing that's going to happen in life, because like I got this. And one of those moments for me from a young age was when my dad died. He passed away when I was around that, like I think I was 9 years old when he passed away. And I remember thinking and saying to myself out loud, there's nothing worse that can happen to me in this life than losing my dad. If this is already happening, it's happening right now. Nothing will ever beat this. Nothing will ever trump this. That's what I used to think and believe in. So anything that happened to me from that point on, moving forward, I was like, it doesn't matter. Like it can't get worse than what I've already experienced. Even when my foster mom, who's known me my entire life since I was a little baby, she was my daycare mom. When she passed away, I remember now at this point, I'm an adult, when she's passing away. And now I have to go through this grief again at this moment of losing someone significant. And I had that voice in the back of my head saying, or asking myself, how is this? How is this experience now? Is it worse than losing your dad? And can you even compare it? And the answer is, I cannot even compare it. I used to think and believe for all those years that nothing will ever be worse than losing my dad. Then I lose my foster mom, and I'm like, holy shit, I can't even compare this. This is completely different. Two completely different people with different significant roles and time in my life. But going back to the point of what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, I think that what it does, these moments, is that it builds character within us to overcome other things that we know are going to happen in life down the line.
Absolutely. I think what doesn't kill you makes you stronger is oversimplifying it. You can definitely get deeper. And I agree with you 1,000%. Yeah, you did a great job of actually pinpointing in what ways it actually makes you stronger when you go through these adversities. And it does build a stronger character. And, that's one side of the spectrum. The other side of the spectrum is that, like, hopefully we get to a place, and maybe this is just the idealist in me, but less people will have to go through less trauma. But I don't really think that's realistic. I think that's just the reality of living on Earth.
Yeah, but you're right. People are going to go through trauma. You know what the challenge is that most people will not go through the process of healing themselves from the trauma that they're experiencing and have experienced in life. We like people like myself, and I don't even know if you're like this, but if you have had a tough background of some sort, any sort, what you've learned is to cope and manage with those different situations and how to overcome them, but not to truly how to deal with them deep down. So at some point you get caught up with all of that, and you're in a place of realizing, holy shit, I need to heal from this. There's so much just coming up to the surface at this point. And that's typically when people get really desperate and they start seeking out professional help out of desperation, when it's something they should have done a very, very long time ago.
Yeah, and these are things much much deeper than sales. Like, um, do you think for some people, build like being successful or finding success in a career, in particular sales career, do you think that that can be kind of like a way to overcome some of your trauma and like rise above some of the things you've been through, or do you think that the sales and the profession you should cope, you should figure that out first, and then kind of focus on climbing the ladder? What are your thoughts there?
I think I would focus more. I don't think it matters what the profession is. And I think that we can learn a lot from life that we can then apply in sales or whatever other profession. Great example of this, a personal example of this, is yesterday. I was in this place looking for a mental health professional, right? Like finding someone to talk with. Because I've come to this realization that, yeah, I do have a lot of things that I need to continue to process on and work through for myself. That's my number one priority, is to do that for myself. And as I'm going through this, I find myself so frustrated with how this process is and how it is, one, not a scalable process to help people as quickly as possible. Number two, they're not listening to my pain points of what is urgent and what I need help with right now and why that is important to me. And then number three, they have a whole scorecard system of evaluating how much help somebody needs. So those three things, I was like, I don't like any of this. This makes no sense. And I immediately start thinking about, what if we did this in business? What if we did this as a sales organization? Talking to a prospect, not really listening to what their needs are. And then we start to rate them and create a scorecard for what they've answered to how urgent their help is for you to be there for them and support them. And if they don't score between whatever amount and they don't fit the scale, then I'm sorry, but you're gonna have to go back and somebody else is gonna have to help you. Or if we did get someone through, then we're gonna say, you know what, I am the SDR or BDR right now. I'm gonna help you with this up until this stage or this point of our conversation. And then I'm gonna hand you over to someone else, who's then gonna hand you over to someone else and someone else. And for each time you get that handover, you have to start all over again with your story of telling who you are and what you need help with. Imagine the frustration as a buyer if you have to go through that.
I think
Like, I would be
I don't know
pissed.
what sales companies you work for, but there's a couple companies that got that type of process.
Oh,
I mean, companies I've worked for, it's been pretty good. But yeah, there's definitely companies out there. You hear it on LinkedIn, like the buyers are like, why do I have to tell
yeah.
10
I just want a
people
demo. Why
my
do I have to do
needs?
this?
Yeah, it's like,
Yeah.
I didn't told you my pain point 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we definitely have to be mindful. And the mental health doctors and facilities also, they really need to be mindful, because that's way more important than a buyer's concern.
Yeah, I mean, it's frustrating, but so to answer your question, like, how important is it to have it together, regardless of what profession you go into, and how do you know? I think that was your question. How do you know which profession is the right one? Was that the question?
No, I think my question was more like, for people who have mental health, or just are suffering from different things, come from humble beginnings, things of this nature. They might be coming into a profession where their like stability, mental stability is coming in unchecked, right? And they might be able to pass through and get the job and start and do well initially, but like it's possible also that those issues can uh, arise later down the road while they're in their career. And so, but at the same time, so my question was more like, should people like kind of check that as soon as possible, or should people just acknowledge that they have these problems but also pursue what excites them? But I want to I want to segue, but I actually want to touch on that, because when I think about my own story, coming out of college in 2014, I wasn't like mentally just like excited to tackle the world. Like, I graduated college, I was 21. I wasn't in the best place mentally, But actually, for me, embarking in my going into the workforce, embarking on my first sales job selling solar panels throughout the Bay Area, that actually helped me with my mental well-being a little bit, like, because it gave me a sense of like purpose. It gave me a sense of like accomplishment. And so, I wasn't perfect. And, you definitely have to, check those things, your mental well-being as you go on. But I would venture to say my stance is that, definitely find things that you're passionate about, find things that you're good at, and pursue those, because sometimes that can be the key, that can be I think the crutch to helping you overcome whatever it is you might be facing. That's just from my personal experience.
One thing I want to add to this is, I think if you have a level of self-awareness of whatever you go into next, whether that's sales or something different, but if you know within yourself, like maybe there's an area you have a challenge with, in certain professions isn't going to help you more easily overcome those things. So as an example, let's use myself, because I'm typically a good example for a lot of this shit, because I've been through a few things in life.
So you have a lot to give back.
I do have so much to give back, which is, I'm happy to do this and use myself as an example and as a resource to make this more real. So I have been sober coming up on 4 years this March. And I'm saying that and sharing that because certain professions would and could put potentially people into a situation they don't want to be part of, right? We know when you work in sales, a lot of people tend to go out for a lot of dinners, and I'm trying not to stereotype the profession here, but this is typically what happens is you do have a lot of social gatherings. Social gatherings typically involves alcohol or other things. And at minimum, at least alcohol is included.
At the minimum.
I expect that at minimum, right? Now we're starting to have conversations about people openly smoking weed together and maybe doing other things, So it is evolving as society is evolving and accepting other things in life. And so as this is going on, my thing is like, let's be mindful of the people who are not choosing to participate in those activities. And let's normalize that, because you shouldn't feel the pressure of having to do certain things like drinking alcohol just because you work in this profession. But also be very aware on the other side that if you do have a problem with alcohol and you haven't seeked out the help that you need and get stable on your own to fix your mind to begin with and then your body, then maybe this is not the right timing for you to step into this profession. It doesn't mean that because you have the passion, you have the interest, and you have the curiosity that you shouldn't do it. It just means let's be mindful about when you do it, and let's be mindful of what type of organization you're going to step into that can honor your feelings and honor your path that you're on to stay sober, if that's the chosen path.
Word, for real. And I want to give us, I wish we had more time because there's other things that we got to touch on too. But, I do want to give a shout out to Salman Mahuddin, who was a guest on the podcast a few months ago. And that was his story exactly. He practices Islam, and so he doesn't drink. And so one thing that I would say is, drinking or, being a follower will you won't be successful in anything you do, really. It's more respectable just to be a leader, be independent, and yes, in the sales career, there's definitely those influences, but to all my listeners, just stay strong, and hey, by all means, if that's what you want to get into, it won't, just do you, you know what I mean? But also if don't feel like don't fall into the pressures of, feeling like you got to do this, right? There was the whole thing about the boys club. I don't know if you remember that, because historically tech sales and sales, it was like a bunch of guys, very monotonous, and fraternity type situation. I've had managers talking about doing coke and doing all type of stuff that I'm just like, I could never. I'm just not interested in those things. And then number two, I would never just proactively come out and talk about these type of things, even if I was doing it, even if I did smoke weed. Like I worked for a CEO for once, and he talked about, I won't name the company, but he talked about, hey, fun fact, in college I sold drugs, like weed. I'm like, I wish I could tell that story. I just don't feel comfortable because, like, one, I'm black. Number two,
Exactly.
number two,
Exactly.
like, I'm cool. Like, I just don't have that privilege. But anyway,
Yep.
moving on. I do want to touch on a couple things because you have a really you have a really cool story. I want to first touch on how you got into sales really briefly, and then how you actually made the transition into sales enablement, and kind of like what prompted you to go in that path.
How did I get into sales? It was a very intentional decision because it was one of those things where I had done like internships in retail stores and done other things in high school. Like we had to actually create our own business in the final senior year. And part of that challenge was you got the opportunity to pitch your idea in front of an audience. And my business partner and she just signed me up for it. She's like, well, you're the one who's responsible for sales and marketing for our little thing, so you're gonna pitch this. And I was like, okay, fine, whatever, I don't care. I did it with no preparation, and I think I came in like second place. And I remember being so pissed. This is the competitive part of me, being so pissed, like I cannot believe I came in second, what is this? And I remember being so frustrated with myself because I knew if I would have just taken this seriously, I would have been number one, no doubt. But I didn't. So that's where like the appetite for sales started for me. That was senior year in high school. Yep. And then I also knew in the back of my head I wasn't going to be able to do the type of sales that I wanted to do unless I did it full time. And then what happened over the next couple of years was, I moved to the States. I worked as an au pair, taking care of kids with a family. And then I started college. And while I was in college, I couldn't do sales full time, not the type of sales I wanted to do. And so I just knew like this is not the right time. So I'm going to do other professional things and explore other areas. So I did some community development. I did HR, and I was doing that for about 3 years while I was in college, working part-time for a company in HR admin. And then I was in college. And by the time I finished college or was about to graduate, I then had that very serious, intentional conversation with myself of, okay, what do I do next? Which path do I take? I have to make a decision, a conscious decision about this, and not just fall into something that I didn't pick for myself. So it was that choice of, do I go and continue in HR because this is what I've been doing part-time for the past 3 years, or do I try something new and do like tech sales and try that out? Because I've always been curious, and now I have the opportunity to do it 100%.
Really quickly, how did you even like? Were you exposed to that from your foster parents? Like, were they in the tech industry? Were they in like corporate America?
No.
Like, how did you even know that tech was a thing in college? Like, just
Yeah, I took a class, Sales in Action. I went to Babson College, a private business school, and I took a course called Sales in Action, which is all about sales. And that's where I learned a whole lot more about tech sales. And we got to visit, like HubSpot is based in Boston. We got to go there, meet with people, learn more about what they do on a day to day. And that's where I was like, oh, business development. I like this. I can see myself doing this, right? And then I just found out like I could start off as, a BDR or SDR. And that's exactly what I did after that point. I made a decision to say, I'm going to try out this sales thing for at least a year, see how I like it. If I vibe with it, I'll continue going to that path, see what happens next. If I don't, well, then I can always fall back on, HR, because I don't mind it. I just didn't love it, all parts of it. So I went into that area of focusing on tech sales and started off as a BDR for a fintech company in Boston.
wow, that's awesome. That's awesome. I wish my school had a sales course.
Yeah.
No, that's cool. Um, so you got into sales as a BDR for a fintech company, and you did sales for a little while. I'm assuming you were a BDR. You did some closing as an account executive. we don't have to go through every step of the career, but you ultimately have now found yourself in sales enablement. So I would love if you could just give a high level overview of what like you do, as and then
Yeah.
also like
It,
you know what prompted you and what inspired you to go in that route.
Yeah, let's start with the inspiration and reason for moving on from being an account
Okay.
executive to
Okay.
enablement. What it was I was in a place of really wanting to be able to help more people. I've had friends, I have people in the community coming to me asking prospecting questions, asking about how to negotiate, and just asking a lot about sales because that's what I talk about, that's what I do outside of with my job, outside of my job. And that's where I kind of knew like, hold on, I actually do have a passion and a joy for helping other people. I have a passion for education because I value education. I know how significant that's been in my life. And I love the idea of practicing how to be a better communicator. And I get to do that when I'm trying to explain a process or explain how to do something or get someone, I love the moments that I get with people where like the light bulb it just comes up and you're like,
Ding. Oh,
okay,
the light
I
bulbs right
noticed you
there.
realize, yeah, right? Like when somebody realizes something about themselves,
Hmm.
not because you told them what the answer is, but because they figured out by having a
Right.
conversation with you. And I love
Hmm.
that. And so I was at that point of like, hold on, I don't mind doing sales, but do I really love it as much as I would like to love it? No, I don't. Not right now. And so I got into enablement with that intention of I want to be able to serve more salespeople the way I've been able to do it outside of my job. I want to do that 10x and be much more like there for one organization and for the sales team. And now in my role, like it involves so many different areas which I love. I get to help coach sales reps on their conversations, on their calls, and I get to just help them level up a little bit from where they were to certain areas that can be better improved on. I get to do the piece of education around sales processes, sales pipeline, um, how to prospect, like, and I love those things, like putting things into action and into a movement. And then I get to do a lot of reinforcement from the things that they've learned in the past. Focus on the mindset a lot. Like, how do you create a mindset, a mentality of accountability and responsibility for yourself as a sales rep? Because I can't push or force anyone to do certain things, but I can tap into certain parts within themselves that might make them see themselves from a different perspective or help them realize what their potential is, and that will then motivate them to do something differently and to take more of an ownership and accountability. I can't force anyone. Their manager can't force them to do anything. And then another piece of my job, like today, was just acting like a counselor. Like I had someone coming to me ranting about things and just sharing what's going on, and it needed to be confidential. Like it's not something I will share with anyone, but that's just part of the job. And I love that they're able to trust me and have those intimate conversations. Like this is what I love to do, connecting with people.
Well, no, that's awesome. Big shout out to all the sales enablement folks, helping me as a seller, as a closer, do my job better. Love y'all. Keep doing y'all. All right. You know what? I see actually some similarities between our podcasts. It's more personable. It's more personal, right? It's more deep, right? It's not just about how to prospect, how to get someone to open an email, right? It's a little bit more just, about the people, the person behind, again, the seller. So I want to know, like, what inspired you? First of all, listeners, viewers, make sure y'all check out the podcast. What is your legacy? It's a very interesting podcast. It'll give you just insight into corporate America, but again, the people behind corporate America, what's driving the people, what's important to people. So definitely check that out. And can you quickly share, how can people get a hold of the podcast before we dive into that?
Yeah, check it out on Spotify, Google. Just search for "What is your legacy" and it will pop up.
Cool. So let's talk about what made you want to go into like what Yeah, like what made you want to start podcasting and like that topic in particular?
I've had this desire for years,
Oh wow.
probably like it took me like 3 or 5 years to get to the point of actually doing a podcast and to
Okay.
push myself outside of my comfort zone with it and have a purpose and a reason for a podcast.
Mm.
I knew I wanted to have a podcast. I could envision myself doing it, but I just wasn't sure what I was envisioning myself talking about in that podcast. I'm a visualizer. That's how I'm able to create certain things for myself, is to visualize it first and speaking into existence and affirmations. And that's not everything. That's not the only reason why things happens, but I like that part of life and being able to be in a positive mindset. And that helps for sure. But yeah, I knew I wanted to do a podcast. I just wasn't sure what it was going to be about. So I wasn't going to push it. I wasn't going to force it. I was just going to flow with it and see what comes into my life. And it wasn't until August, I believe, of 2020, I was playing a thing called the Sales Game with two Australian guys who created this. And a part of the challenge in the Sales Game is having a Shark Tank moment. And in the Shark Tank moment, which by the way is a TV show that I used to be obsessed with, I love it. When people are pitching, you get to listen to them and learn from them, and I loved it. So when they had this opportunity on the Sales Game to do a Shark Tank moment, a pitch your idea, whatever idea comes to mind, I signed up for it. And I was like, I'm going to do this right now with these people. And what just naturally came out of me was this idea of a podcast. And I was like, it's going to be about life, it's going to be about purpose. And then I came in with the idea of legacy. But the reason why it came first and foremost from an emotional standpoint, because in 2015, I lost my foster mom to cancer. And I had no idea how to handle this grief. Even though I've been through this as a child, it's definitely not the same thing as an adult in a different stage of my life. But not knowing how to deal with it and dealing with the grief and the emotions, which is something, by the way, I am still dealing with up until now. And I think I will continue to deal with this. I don't think it's ever going to completely be gone. Just going to handle it differently over time. But what came out of the Shark Tank moment and this idea that I pitched was being able to talk to people about life and what their purpose was while they are still here, while you can still hear it. Because a part of my regret was thinking, I wish I knew directly from her what she wanted her life to be about. I wish we would have had that conversation. I wish she would have been more open during the time she was sick with cancer to just share how she was feeling and what she was going through, but she didn't. And I wanted to know more. I've always been curious to have deeper conversations with people. So I thought, why don't I start a podcast? And the podcast is going to be with people about their lives, talking about what they want it to look like, how they want to leave this earth. And it's just about legacy, leaving a legacy.
No, I love that. I love this idea, and it's yeah, I love. I didn't realize how you came about, making the show, and that's deep, because we often, time just flies by. Like I've been, like I'm so busy with like either the podcast or like my job. I'm also like redoing my house and like my landscape, so I'm just like hella busy. And when you're so busy, time just flies by. Before you know it, it's a month. Before you know it, it's 3 months. Before you know it, it's a year. Before you know it, it's 10 years. And it's like, um, obviously, like we need to check in with ourselves to see what our legacy is and what the purpose of what we're doing is, and like why we're doing whatever we're doing. And sometimes if there's no reason, you just doing it things because you like to do it, that's okay. But like I think it's still good to check in. But then a next layer, the next step, the next layers, once you check in with yourself, check in with those that you love and that that you talk to. Like what are their reasons for living, and what are they looking to do, and how can you play a part in that? Because I think that's that's major. So yeah. There was one question that I wanted to ask you, because a big part of this show is giving value and insight to the listeners, and we're in the great resignation. We're like, a lot of people are just not going back to work. They're like, screw this, I'm staying at home. But when you we discussed this on our like a few weeks ago when we were chatting just personally, when you made your transition into sales enablement, you hadn't actually been a sales enablement professional before. Can you share a little bit about how you made that, like the just kind of like logistics of what you did to prep and like how you were able to land a job that you would actually never had experience with on paper, at least?
Yeah, I was seeking out conversations with people. That's how this started, with the curiosity of let me learn exactly what people do in enablement. It's called sales enablement, revenue enablement. And I was like, what's what? Who does what? I don't understand. What's the structure? Who do they report to? Like, what do they do on a day-to-day basis? I just had questions and I was curious. So I started to just reach out to people that I knew that worked in enablement. And one of those people is Roderick Jefferson. He's like a legend when it comes to enablement. He wrote a book about it, which I bought, Sales Enablement 3.0. Great book. It gives you, regardless of where you are in the process of learning about enablement, whether you're like I was, never been in it, don't fully understand it, let me learn. He gives very good insight and understanding to the profession, to someone who's like me now, a couple months later, in it, and I need to figure out scalable ways to do certain things within my job to help the sales organization. He talks about that as well in his book, of how to align with that, how to communicate and work closely with different team members. So anyway, I reached out to Roderick. We're part of Sales for the Culture, which you are as well. And so I was like, hey, I know you're like really into this. This has been your thing for over 20 plus years. I'm really curious about it. I can't decide which path I'm going to go next because I don't see myself continuing as an individual contributor. I'm either going to go into enablement or I'm going to go into a sales leadership position where I can be in touch with people and help people. That was my goal. And so he's like, yeah, sure, let's chat. And we set up a chat. And in that first like one-to-one, because we've seen each other in other calls before, but this was our first one-to-one. He goes, hey, would you want me to mentor you? Would you want this to like continue? And I was like, yeah, absolutely I do. Let's do it. And he's like, okay, cool. So then we started to meet every month, once a month, for about an hour. And we would talk and he would help me figure out, why do I want to do the thing I think I want to do next? Because I was set, like my heart was set, I'm going to be a sales leader because that just sounds sexy. Like this is what I want to do.
Yeah.
That's the path to go on to next. It's just a natural evolution from someone who's been a BDR to now an AE. Like obviously you're going to go into be like a BDR manager, AE manager, whatever, and go that path. That's what I thought was going to happen. And he continuously just questioned my way of thinking about the reasoning to why. He's like, help me understand why you feel this way. Why do you think about that way? Then he gave me an exercise to do, to go and write down the areas that I would be wanting to do, whether I get paid or not, in both directions. And what am I good at? And what do I enjoy about it? I went through that exercise, came back to him the following month. He's like, okay, let me hear it. What's going on here? What did you come to a conclusion with? And that's when it was so clear to me that what I'm actually saying that I want to do versus what I believe I want to do are two different things. And naturally, with the answers that I wrote down to those questions, I was leaning much more to enablement. And so that's how I get into it initially, by going through that exercise and being very intentional about the direction instead of prescribing to myself, this is where I need to go next, because that's what I believed in. And then I started the process of looking for those, just first of all, conversations, learning even more. And then looking at like the job descriptions, like, does this even sound interesting to me? Like, is this something that I would want to learn more about? And then I began the process of applying for different jobs and reaching out to people saying, hey, this is the direction I'm going into. Obviously updating, like the practical parts of updating your resume, which is a whole other story, because let me tell you, I had already started the process beforehand, but then it was like finish it, and it was great, because when I first applied for those sales leadership positions, nobody was as interested in me as they were when I updated it to focus on enablement. All of a sudden, companies were like, we need to talk to you. It went from 0 to 100 real quick, because I shifted certain parts and I told a completely different story about myself through my resume, And what happened was I got the job. All of this happened. I left my previous company. Within 19 days, I had an offer to be signed with User Testing, the company I went with. And I had a few offers on the table too, and negotiating, going back and forth, figuring things out. Ended up going with User Testing because that was actually my number one that I wanted to go with. That was like at the highest priority. We just had to figure a few things out and if it was going to be the right time for this type of role. But what happened afterwards is that I'm sharing all that just to say that how I've been able to help other people, because I made a LinkedIn post like, this is what's happening, I'm moving into enablement, had a few people reaching out, and I'm in the process of helping someone right now doing the exact same transition. She's like literally in the middle of interviewing with companies, and she went through that whole thing. I worked with her closely on updating her resume, making sure she's telling the right story, she's going for what she wants, and then having the conversations and the presentations. And she's like in the middle of this, and she's about to get a few offers on the table, which I'm so excited about. But I think the transitions in life and the changes can be so exciting if you embrace them for what they are.
No, I love
instead of fear.
Yeah, I love your story too. I mean, yeah, thank you for giving us like the action items that you took from speaking with, a mentor, someone that's been a very senior and a leader in this space, and being open to feedback, being open to change, and not being so like dead set on a specific career or title. To changing your resume and to telling a story that's more relevant for that particular career, to applying to multiple jobs. I can't do it all for the people. Like, you share the story, people got to read between the lines. People got to see, what you did and, take advantage of that. But yeah, that's extremely helpful. I'm glad you were able to share that. I know we don't have much time, and a big part of the show, it's actually my favorite part of the show, is the game.
Oh, the game.
We gotta play the game.
Oh,
It's game time.
bring it on. Okay, game time.
All right, so
let's go.
this game is called the Legacy Game.
Oh.
The Legacy Game. So basically, I'm gonna say two things and 2 items, and you have to tell me which is more important to your legacy. Okay. Now, again, all of these can be important, and it's supposed to be a hard game. So let's start off with drum roll, please. All right. What is more important to your legacy? Tech sales or podcasting?
Podcasting.
Okay. Family or friends?
Family.
Family, okay. Family or being a good dog mom?
Oh man, you put me in that. I mean, family, because she is part of the family. Okay.
Okay.
She's in that box. She's family.
All right. Helping others in tech sales or representing people from your community?
That's a tough.
And when I say community, I mean like your demographics, so like your gender, ethnicity, things of that nature. Helping those people or helping people that are anyone that's in the tech sales industry. What's most important to your legacy?
I mean, my people is more important than the general population.
Okay. Alrighty. Personal or professional legacy? Which is more important?
Personal.
Personal legacy. Okay. All right. That's the game.
Hold on. Hold on. I'm a person who just needs to go a bit deeper because I love the game. I love that you created this, but I always am like, but hold on, let me just add this.
Okay, let's do this. Listeners, viewers, Galem is gonna have me on her podcast, and we're gonna have a part 2, and we'll go deeper into the game.
Please,
so
yes.
Hold that thought, Galem.
Yeah.
This is where we we're gonna start your podcast on this note. All right, but Galem, it was an honor and pleasure to have you on the show today. It's been so fun. I really appreciate you sharing your insight, your story. It's a very inspiring story. You have an inspiring career journey, and I can't wait to see what's just next for you in your career. You're going to do a lot of things. I can already, if someone has the amount of drive and hustle you have, it's just a matter of time before you're at the top of the mountain, just, conquering a bunch of things. So, again, appreciate you joining the show, and, all the best to you on whatever it is that you pursue next.
I remember when the vision wasn't as clear. I don't think they thought that I would make it, but motherfuck they thoughts, cause I'm here. Now we here for the taking, yeah. My God.